Step 1, solve for x squared. Then take the radical, simplify, don't forget the plus or minus. So let's just try a couple of these. X squared minus 4 equal to 71. We're going to follow that three-step process where we solve for x squared, take the radicals, simplify for our final answer. 3x squared minus 4 is equal to 71. Solve this quadratic equation. So I got to get x squared by itself. Get me started, Austin. I got to get rid of subtracting 4. So what do we do to both sides?
Add 4.
We just add it. Okay, slide it over by adding to each side. I will bring down 3x squared on the left. 4 and 71 makes 75 on the right. 3x squared equals 75. I still don't have x squared by itself because I have 3 times x squared. So what cancels out multiplying by 3? Divide both sides by 3. X squared equals 25. Objective 1, x squared is now by itself. I have x squared equal to some number. So now I can move on and take the square root of both sides. Because my square root, it cancels out. Just like addition and subtraction are the opposite. Square roots and squares are the opposite. If I take 3 squared, I get 9. When I take the square root of 9, I get back to what I started with. It just cancels itself out. X squared equal to plus or minus the square root of 25. That's pretty easy to simplify. What's the square root of 25? Don't forget the plus or minus for your answer. 2 solutions, both positive 5 and negative 5. Next one is 4x squared plus 80 equals 0. Before I try and solve this, compare these 2 equations. What do you notice about them? Let's talk about why solving by square roots for this type of equation makes the most sense. There's lots of different methods we're going to use throughout this unit. Why would I choose to solve by square roots for this particular type of equation? What makes them similar? Yeah, go ahead.
Because there's no like plus x to the first power.
It's like missing the b value, right? It's missing the linear part. It's not 4x squared plus 5x plus 80. It's not 4x squared minus 2x plus 80. It's just the quadratic term. I got the a value and the constant term. There's no middle linear part. There's no b value, the plus 5x or the minus 3x on either one of these 2. When you solve by square roots, typically you're not going to have that b value in the middle, that linear part. All right, so get going. Get x by itself. What do we do first?
Subtract 80.
Minus 80 from both sides. So I'll slide 80 over to the right. And put negative 80 down. Mackenzie, try the next piece here. What do I do to both sides next? You bet. Luckily, 4 divides into 80 20 times. So I'll bring down x squared equals negative 20. Take the square root, and I'll write x equals, don't forget the plus or minus, square root of negative 20.
You can simplify that.
Sure, that's what we're going to do here first. Most of the work on this last step then is how you're going to simplify the radical. Trevor, is this going to be a real number or an imaginary number?
Imaginary.
How do you know?
Because it's negative.
Negative. So I'm going to bring down plus or minus I, radical 20. But I believe the square root of 20 could even be simplified further because aren't there perfect squares that divide into 20? Namely, which one? 4. 4 and 5. Square root of 4 makes 2. So I think I've got I times 2 radical 5 for my 2 different solutions. just going to try a bunch of these here. So they're all a little bit different in how you simplify the radical. Sometimes you get a nice number like 25 to take the square root of. Sometimes you get a negative number that you have to square root, so it's imaginary. They're all a little bit different in how you simplify for your final answer. Negative 3x squared plus 17 equals negative 15. Just like we noticed on the last couple ones, there is no b value. There's no plus 5x or minus 2x. It's just an x squared term and a bunch of constants floating around. So in this type of equation, yeah, solving by square roots makes the most sense. How do we start? What do you say, Evan? How do you get rid of the adding 17? Minus 17 to both sides, okay. Be careful, watch these negatives. Negative 15 minus another 17 is negative 32. Negative 3x squared equal to negative 32. Just like we divided both sides by 4, I think I'll do the same thing and divide both sides by negative 3 this time. I really like how 4 divided into 80 to make a whole number. Does 3 divided into 32? No. So I'm going to leave it as a fraction. Can I simplify the double negatives, though? I have a negative on top and a negative on bottom in that fraction. 2 negatives divide to make what sign? Positive. So let's just break down. Plus or minus the square root of 32 over the square root of 3. I square roots. The top and the bottom. I don't know what I can do first here. I'm trying to simplify this. What's some place to start? All right, sure. I was thinking simplify the square root of 32, but we can absolutely do that first. What's the square root of 3 times the square root of 3? 3. 32 times 3 is 96. So x equals plus or minus the square root of 96 divided by 3. First goal achieved. I've got the square root canceled out in the denominator. But 96, I think, can still be simplified. What perfect square divides it in 96? So that's 16. How many times? 6. So the square root of 16 times the square root of 6 is 4 square root of 6. So I'm left with 4 radical 6 over 3. There's nothing to divide on top and bottom. This fraction 4 over 3 can't be simplified any further. So I think we've got to leave it just like that. Sometimes you get nice numbers when you divide, sometimes you don't. This one was just a fraction I had to simplify. 3 does not divide into 32. So I just started simplifying the square root of that fraction, like we practiced the last couple of days. Questions, please, guys. Yeah.
Where would the I be on that bit?
There is no I.
There's none because it's
A negative divided by a negative, Luke, makes what sign? Positive. So I just brought down positive 32 thirds. When you scored a positive number, not imaginary. Yeah.
Why would the I not be in that?
Okay, same question here. 2 negatives, when I divide them, make what sign?
No, the problem before that.
Problem before that. It was the square root of negative 80, wasn't it?
Yeah.
So I had I times 2 radical 5, I think, written down before I erased it.
No, you didn't have.
Oh, well, then there should have been an I. I'm sorry.
No.
It was the square root of negative 20, wasn't it? So it was 2 root 5 times I. Sorry, my bad. My bad. Good catch, though. All right, you guys got this one before you leave. put 1 up here. Why don't you guys try this? 5x squared plus 48 equals 0.